Welcome, everyone. John Hanley Jr. here. I'm very pleased to be joined by a couple of former Lifespring trainers going back and dear mentors of mine when I was a young man. And really, they've always been mentors of mine. We have Royce Gardner and John Webb. Welcome, guys.
Nice to be here, John.
I feel welcome.
All right, good. Well, we're all excited about this summit training that we're going to be doing near the end of October, and we look forward to sharing with you our intention about that and some of our ideas of what we have in store for you. But before we get to that, we'll just kind of get to know these trainers a little bit. So if you guys go back to your beginning in the transformational journey for yourself, tell us a little bit about how you heard of the training and what it was like when you did your training and what you got out of it. So Royce, do you want to go first?
Yeah. Here's how it came about for me. I had moved from Utah to Portland, Oregon for work. And the first job I took up there was in medical sales because I had been pursuing going into medicine and decided not to. And I found out I was fairly good at selling things, but I didn't like being in the medical arena. So I went to work for IBM, the old office products division. And I did it because I wanted to be trained by them because they were kind of the best at sales at the time. And I wanted their logo on my lapel for the doors that would open. Well, I was sitting in my office at Portland one day, and I got a phone call from a guy. I don't remember his name, but he was the operations manager for the Portland Lifespring office. He said, "I need to buy some equipment from you because we're expanding our office a little bit. Would you please come over?" And so I went over. The office was in an old house on Broadway near the Lloyd Center that had been converted into office space. And I remember walking in to the, what would have been the living room, but there was a foyer, and something about the people was different. And the way I would describe it was there was a look in their eye that was saying to me, "I know something you don't know." And it was bugging me. So I was ushered upstairs to where the guy's office was, and I sat down. It was a relatively small room, and just as I sat down, about 25 people jammed themselves into this little small room, led by someone by the name of Ray Blanchard. And Ray said, "We heard this great-looking guy came in, and we all had to come and see him." And then they left, and my mind is spinning now. And anyway, I make out this order for this guy, and one of the things that I hated about any kind of work is paperwork. So I had to discipline myself. I left, I went down the block, and I sat in my car, and I was filling out the paperwork. And all of a sudden, I looked at the clock on my dash, and an hour of time had passed. And I had no sense of time. And I had realized that I was talking to myself out loud. And what I was saying was, "Those people are weird. Those people are weird. Why do I want to go back and be around them?" So then I found out that they did what we know as guest events. And there was one at the, John, I believe it was the Red Lion Inn and right on the Columbia River, before you go over to Vancouver, Washington. And as
They
I
were
walked
everywhere.
in, yeah, remember that?
They were
So,
everywhere. They were at the Hilton.
yeah.
Portland was booming. Lifespring Center of Portland was like the place to be.
Oh, it was amazing. But so I walk in, and this place is just crowded with people. And there's a registration. You have to register to get into the event. And of course, they gave me a name tag. And what did I do? I put it in my pocket. That tells you a little bit about where I am at that time. So as I'm standing there in this crowd of people, just amazed at the energy, I hear my name. And I look around, and across the room, there's a guy. His name is Ken Wright. I went to high school with him, but I haven't seen him. This was 1977, and I hadn't seen him since 1967 when I graduated. And he comes running over to me, and I go, "Ken, what are you doing here?" Oh, da, 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 da. He said, well, I'm here for this event. I said, oh, really? He said, yeah, my wife, Darl, just took the basic. And Darl walks up right then. He goes, oh, you remember Darl. Now, I was student body president of my high school. This woman that he's showing as his wife, I have no clue, no memory of her at all. So I lie and say, oh, yeah, I remember you, Darl. It's nice to see you, all that stuff. And so now we're talking, and it comes to me who she is, or who she was. She was such a low energy, low self-esteem person in high school that we would have said things like, if you walked into the room and she was the only one there, you still wouldn't notice her. Well, what I saw standing next to me was this alive, vibrant, gorgeous, and I'm thinking, she just did this. Holy, something's going on here. So I go in to the room, and of course it was the post-training night. And so they tell us all that. Gail Griggs was the area director, and she says, they're going to leave, then they're going to come back, all that stuff. And then she introduces the speaker, who is Randy Revelle. And Randy does his little thing, and then he asks for if there were any questions. And so I raise my hand, and I stand up, and I say, okay, well, Randy, let's pretend.
Let me do one correction, Royce.
Yeah.
Randy never did anything little.
Oh, that's true. That's true. So I asked a question that was something like, I'm going to pretend I'm in a supermarket of awareness trainings, and I'm walking down the aisle, and why am I going to pick your box off of the shelf as opposed to anybody else? And what I remember is Randy just looked at me and said, based on results. And I sat down, and he went on with other stuff, and I thought, wait a minute, did he really answer my question? But he's right, I'm here. Then during the break, I go over to get some cookies, and there's this guy standing there who starts a conversation, and he says, well, what do you think? You think you're going to do this? I said, oh, I don't know, maybe, probably. And then he walked away. It was Mr. Webb. I believe you were in the TC program at that time, or maybe you were already in training.
Yeah.
So at the end of the event, I get a chance to talk.
John, that sounds like great enrollment on your part.
Oh, yeah.
So you like my strategy?
Yeah, yeah, it was great.
So then it's now the end of the event. Randy's out in the audience, and I walked up and I introduced myself again. I said, could I ask you another question? And he said, sure. And I said, could I call you Randy? I know all those kind of social things. And he said, sure. I said, you must have said at least 5 times during your presentation that there's nothing intellectually new in the training, and that I could get a list of books and find all this information there. He said, yeah, that's true. And I said, and you also said at least 3 times that I recall that what I'm going to get out of your training is up to me. So if it's up to me what I'm going to get, and I could get it from books, why do I need to do your training? He looked at me and he said, good point. Now, could I ask you a question? I said, sure. He said, since it is in books, it's been around a long time, and it is up to you to get it. How come you haven't gotten it already? I walked to the enrollment table and signed up. So that's how I got into this game. Somebody called me, kind of like the email I got from you, John, when you said, I've got this event in mind, and I want you to be a part of it and be a speaker. I went, well, here's a call again. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
All right, awesome. So John, I take it you had done the training a little bit before that. What was your journey like?
How far back do you want me to go?
However far back you think is relevant.
Well, I think, yeah, so my version would be I grew up in Utah, and my parents had just moved from a small community to Provo, Utah, where Brigham Young University is. And they bought a newly built house. And my dad was building a fence in the back with lattices, crisscross lattices. and I was out playing in the backyard, and those lattices looked like swords to me. So I started pulling them out of the bundles and playing with them as swords, and I broke 2 or 3 of them, killing the foe. So when my dad got home and saw what I'd done, he grabbed me and took me in the bathroom, pulled down my pants and started spanking me. And he was using those lattices to hit me, but they, of course, if I could break them with swords, they really weren't doing much damage. And in that moment, when I knew I was supposed to be being guilty and punished for this bad act, I looked up at his face and I could see he was having a completely different experience than I was having. And we were both doing the same thing, just different sides of the event. And I think it was in that moment I came to the awareness that I, whoever I was, had a life. And it wasn't his life, and it wasn't my mother's life, and it wasn't anybody else, it was my life. And that I got to have my own individual reality. And yeah, I was surrounded by all of these other people who were having, but I noticed that they were all having different realities too. My father and mother were having conversations about the same thing, but they were in complete disagreement about what reality was. And they ended up getting divorced because their realities were so different. Living in the same house, in the same family, breathing the same air, and all that. So I think that was when I first, that was my first awareness of what I would call, or we call, the human potential movement, which is, you know, who am I in relationship to all of this? That there's an internal reality and an external reality. And I got that so clearly in that moment. So then what I hear Royce doing is he's telling you about a particular segment of time in which that experience occurred to him. So I from that moment, getting spanked by my dad, which I have to tell you at this point, I only saw love in his eyes, even though I could see he was angry, but his anger was within himself. It wasn't about me at all. It wasn't about those pickets at all. That he was actually trying to help me. He was actually trying to prepare me to how to deal with the external world, that there's private property and that people have an attachment to different things in life. So anyway, if I look back now, I see that event leading to another event, another event, another event. So ending up at a Lifespring guest event, even though, like Royce, my mental process was, what am I doing here? This doesn't look like, this doesn't make sense. This doesn't make sense in who I see myself as. I am not a person who would be in this event. In fact, when I went to my first guest event, I went with another police officer. I was a policeman in Portland at the time. And we went there to see what all these crazy people were up to. We were actually investigating. We went in there, we gave false names to the registrar, and then we went in and sat with our backs against the wall and looked around at all the people and tried to figure out which one committed which crimes and how long they'd served in prison. And that's why they were here. It was kind of a reunion for people who were screwed up. And, but, so that my identity as myself as a policeman was at an event, but as I look back on it now, I couldn't have been anywhere else. I was leading myself to that event. I couldn't have been anywhere else. And in fact, every moment of my life, I feel has been on purpose and makes total sense in my now view of who I am. That I wouldn't be here and who I am today had I not taken that step. And I tried really hard not to go to the Lifespring basic training. And at the guest event, I gave them all the justification for why I couldn't attend. And one was that it was being held during Rose Festival. And during Rose Festival in Portland, there's no time off for police officers. So I knew I couldn't get off for those days. And after I'd signed up, telling them I can't go, I'm signing up, but I can't go. I mean, can't. It's impossible for me to go. I went back to, I was a sergeant at the time. I went back, and the lieutenant I worked with, I knew hated me. I didn't get along with him. So I knew that all I had to do was ask for those days off, and he would absolutely tell me, no. You know, it's Rose Festival. I can't let you off. And so I said to him, there's this, and I told him there was a photography workshop going on during these 5 days, and I'd like to attend. And he said, no problem. So I look back and say, you know, obviously I couldn't have been anywhere else, that I was, if there is such a thing as super conscious guidance in our lives, that super conscious. So the subconscious was not guiding me. The subconscious was telling me, there's no way you could be here. The superconscious was advising my consciousness, yeah, this is absolutely the place for you to be. And so it's resonant for me.
Yeah, that's powerful. Was there a particular moment in the training you guys remember? It could be basic or advanced that really struck you and was a turning point for your life. Royce, anything come to mind?
There are several, but the one that I'm going to talk about was sort of the apex of all the other ones. The red-black game. I remember as it was coming to its end, where the other team, quote, was coming back into the room. I had been fairly active in my room. I didn't jump up to take the lead or anything, but at one point we got stuck and nothing was happening because some older woman was not happy and not participating, and so everything just stopped. And so I went over and got her to at least be a part of what we were doing. Otherwise, we were never going to get out of there, and as I thought. And so to cut it right to the essence of it, as the other team was coming back into the room, I remember saying to my group, my team, okay, if I'm wrong about this, I'm just not coming back tomorrow. Then, of course, the trainer gets up and does the debrief of that process. And one of the things that was in the debrief was, after the debrief, like, okay, that's all good information, and you see all that dynamic, but here's the most important piece. The way you played the game is the way you live your life. I almost vomited on the floor because I saw so clearly how the restrictions that I was feeling in my life, the narrowness that was happening, that I wasn't happy about, but didn't really know what to do, was almost all driven by, I had simply reduced myself to being right about everything. I couldn't sleep that night I was late the next morning and got confronted about being late. But I got up on the stage and had an interaction with my trainer about how right I'd gotten to be, and that wasn't working, and I had no clue where I was going from here, but I wasn't going back there. That was probably and then there were a lot of other ones, but that was the main one for me.
Yeah, sounds like a incredible wake-up call, as we say. How about you, John?
Yeah, I think if there had been a camera on me, or through the eyes of my trainer, who was Bob Cozen, if you asked him what kind of how I showed up in the training, he would say pretty unremarkably. And I find with a lot of my life, I don't see the value of the experience until later, and I reflect on it. And so the Lifespring training has been, I don't have words to tell you how big it is in terms of who I am, or who I see myself as today. But I still find in my life, the other day, I was at the club and a guy asked me to help him. And a homeless person came over, and I noticed my prejudice. I noticed my prejudgment of the situation. I was trying to organize the situation. Who am I going to be in this matter as I relate to these two people? But I didn't see the real value of that moment until I stopped later and reflected on it. And I saw I saw the opportunities that I had missed in that moment. So in my life today, I'm wanting to eliminate that gap. So to tell you what I got out of the training really is continuing today. I'm still getting things out of that training. I'm still, as a trainer, I was getting, this is the irony of the whole thing, is that people were paying money. So your dad was paying me money to go be a student. Yeah, I was posing as a trainer. But it was such an unbelievable opportunity to get paid to know how to better seize the opportunity this life is for me, and how big of a grasp of life I can take, and how inclusive I can make it. How much of the external world can I include and embrace in this life? How can I make the best use of this opportunity? And so that's, I think what the training meant for me was how much bigger the opportunity of life is than I thought it was. And so the training in a way was kind of, whether it was the basic or we called it IPE back then, I call it the breakthrough training, was really, I think what happens is we arrive on the planet pretty much in balance, in harmony between our spiritual self, our physical self. And we see this in children and animals, is they're not challenged about life. They love it. They jump into it, they experience, they jump in puddles of water, and the wind doesn't bother them. They're not troubled by anything. They love everything. But our culture, is our our common past, our united past, and the culture wants to preserve itself. And it wants to keep itself the way it is. And so it's always pulling on us. And so we're kind of trained when we're young to, be respectful of other people's attitude and don't say things that will offend them. And, it's about creating boundaries. And the training is a place where it invites you to see that, no, those boundaries, they might have recommended those boundaries to you, but you bought them. But you're not imprisoned by those boundaries. Or if you are, you've imprisoned yourself. And so the training was an opportunity to see that, no, all of life's available to me. And then the friction between, bumping into someone else's point of view about what's right, really is, well, can I have peace and harmony in this conversation, or am I going to be in conflict with this person over this point of view about which is right, the culture's view of who I am, or the training's view of who I am.
Yeah, got it. Great point. Great question. Now, when I was younger and we were hanging out, I knew you guys were friends, but I didn't make this connection that you were graduates at the same time in the same city. So how did your relationship develop? Did you start to be friends fairly soon after you took the training, Royce, or how did that go?
At my post-training guest event, John was there again. He asked me what I thought about the basic. I don't remember exactly what I told him. And then he asked if I was going to do IPE or the advanced or the breakthrough. And I said yes, and he walked away. So then I do the advanced or the IPE. And I'm back at the Coliseum where they're going to be holding the orientation for what we then called TC, later became LP, the leadership program of that. And there was a basic being held in the same room that I had done my basic, or a couple of the days there. And John was standing outside of the door as I was walking down the hallway to go to the orientation. And I stopped and he said, well, how was the advance? I don't remember what I told him about the advance, but he asked me, are you going to do TC? I said, I'm not going to tell you. He said, why? I said, because you asked me if I was going to do the basic and then walked away. You asked me if I'm going to do the advanced and walked away. I'm not telling you. I want to talk to you. So we talked briefly. And I remember, I don't know if John remembers it this way. I remember at some point John said, don't let this influence your decision about whether or not to do the TC program. You need to decide that on your own. He said, but I want to share with you that do you remember that guest event where you stood up and asked that question? I said, yeah. He said, well, I was standing next to the area director. Her name was Gail Briggs. And when you stood up and asked your question, I leaned over to Gail and said, there's our next basic trainer. And then I walked down to the TC orientation. And of course I was going to do TC. And I had an awareness that I was being evaluated by the organization. John and I don't know how John would describe it, but when we met at that guest event in those brief moments, it was like I'd known him forever. And then when we got talking, we found out we had some common backgrounds, like growing up in Utah and religious upbringing and things like that. But that was all just incidental information because the initial meeting was like we'd always known each other. So it's a little bit of a too small a label to say that we became friends, or even too small a label that we became brothers. We used to get mistaken for each other. I don't know if you're aware of that. I remember one time being in the Portland office.
What an honor.
Yeah, yeah, sure. I remember being in the new Portland office. There were a bunch of people. I was down in the hallway, and I was talking to somebody, and somebody said, "Hey, Webb," and I turned around and said, "What?" And they said, "What? You're not Webb." I said, "No, I'm not." So there's a connection that's here that's quite remarkable between the two of us, and I could spend a lot of mental energy trying to figure out what it is, but in this one, I don't want to. I just want to be a part of the experience of what it is, and so that's how I come at our relationship. John may come differently.
Yeah. What was your experience? So you saw something in Royce right away, huh, John?
Yeah, I think the way I would talk about this is uh, I didn't see it so much in the trainings I attended, but as a trainer, what I always observed was that on Wednesday, when people came into the training, they were also different. Height, weight, carrying purses, not carrying purses, black, white, gay, old, young. And in those first 2 or 3 days, all those differences mattered to everyone except the trainer and graduate assistants. We didn't care. We didn't care what they did in the red-black game. We didn't care what they did whenever. So then what happened was Sunday night, and I don't know if you experienced this, John, but in the old days, we used to have such a beautiful finish. We pass out candles, so the graduates would come to the training. So imagine a training of 250 participants, 700,000 graduates coming. We pass out candles to everybody. We're in this gigantic hall. And the trainer has a candle. So everybody comes in, they mingle around, and then the trainer walks, they ask them to sit down. The trainer walks out into the center of this gigantic crowd with a candle. Does a little speech, which essentially is, we all came in here different and separate and at odds with each other, judging, condemning, evaluating everybody. Look around now. You're in love with everyone. You're in love with everything. You're in love with the curtains. You're in love with the lights. You're in love with love is in you, and you're seeing it everywhere. Now, just as a reminder to never, ever let it be like it was on Wednesday again, then the lights go out. The light person turns off the lights. Everything is black. Then the trainer takes out a lighter and lights their own candle, him or her. And they hold it up and they say, all right, what I'd like you to do now is I'm going to light someone's candle. I want you to light someone's candle. And as you light their candle, I want you to just look in their eyes over that light and see that that's really you over there, that we're all in this together. And then the whole place lights up. And then you do the hardest part of the training, which is to say, I want you to blow up, when I get to 3, blow out the candles so you can have it as a reminder to never let it be black again, never let it be dark, never let your life be dark. And people have a hard time blowing out the candle, but they blow out the candle, it's dark, and then you say, welcome to life. The lights go up, the music comes on, and there is a celebration that is unmatched in the world. And one of the things you say when you're lighting those candles is, what if this ceremony included every human being on the planet, regardless of where they live, what color they are, their skin is, any of that stuff, we pass the light from person to person to person. So yeah, Royce is a representation to me of that moment, is that when I look in his eyes, I see that connection. I don't see Royce, the physical body, or Royce, the IBM salesperson, or even Royce, the trainer. I see him as the bringer of the light, as I do you, John, as I do. I mean, this is, think of what you've done with this event. You've brought together people who know how to bring the light and bring and enhance the light in others, which is what you do. Your whole life is devoted to the expansion, the enhancement, the bringing of the light in the world. It doesn't matter who they are, whether they're a man or a woman or whatever, or an animal, a dog, a cat. It's bringing, enhancing that light that's in us all, and thank God it's in us. Thank God it's in us, and that it's here to be experienced and expressed. What an opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. Beautifully said. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Now, you became trainers, of course. Were you on the same track together, or were you a little bit ahead, John? Did you become a trainer first, or how did that work?
Yeah, I don't know who made trainer status first, but I was a little ahead of him in attending the trainings. So he's correct. I was already in the training coordinator program. That's why I was at the guest event, because that was one of the functions you served as a training coordinator. I mean, to think of that it's such a miracle, the whole way Lifespring was constructed. I mean, just start with the name, Lifespring. I mean, this can't be an accident. You know, it's obviously an inspiration, and the people that brought it into being, you know, it had to be those 5 people and they had to be exactly the way they were to have it work, and they were all different. They all had different intentions. They brought different things to the party. But yeah, so the basic, you know, it's a great format, and everything is there, but the second level training takes it further, expands it. And then the third level expands it again, and it has a different focus, a different intention. And it's just, so again, back to this notion of super consciousness guidance. I'm absolutely convinced that the Lifespring trainings were a result of inspiration from the overarching guidance of us as human beings as we integrate ourselves into this physical reality. That it's a gift. It was a gift to us to help us in our advancement. And what a beautiful gift. And that those people could get their personalities out of the way enough to let that wonderful thing have life. And I don't know exactly how many years it had life, but you know, it served its purpose, and it catapulted humanity forward enormously. So even people who weren't in the training were impacted. The whole planet benefited from the fact that it was available. And so it's the same thing for whomever shows up for these 2 days. You know, it'll be people who are attracted to it for some unknown reason, and it will help them to move forward, which will help all the people that they'll touch move forward. You know, we're all in this together. We're all serving our own function. So just like in the training, you know, the music person had to be the best music person they could be for that thing to work. So the trainer, it looks like the trainer's doing all the work. No, they're just in the front of the room. You know, how important is it to have a training coordinator in the back of the room who during Royce's red black game, and he looks over at them for an expression to indicate whether they're doing it right or doing it wrong, and there's no expression. You know, it's so beautiful. So I forgot the question I'm answering, but you get my drift.
Yeah, no, it's all good. It's all perfect. So Royce, when you were coming up as trainer, who was your biggest mentor, and what was that process like for you?
When I got hired, well, I left being on staff of a IPE on a Sunday to fly down to San Rafael for a group interview. There were a number of people in that group interview that ended up being with Lifespring for a long period of time. Amelia Davis was there. I was there. There was a guy from San Diego there. A number of people from DC. All of these were people that the cities had identified as potentially being trainer candidates. So I got hired out of that interview, not immediately. It was about another 2 months or something like that. But when I got hired, I became a part of a group that we ended up being called the 90-Day Wonders. Jack Swizzig was a part of this group too. We were working in our branch offices. I was in Portland, basically doing whatever needed to be done, learning the business. Then we came into Central, and Mel Christie was running the group of us, and we'd meet some corporate people and find out what goes on in the corporate level, and then we would go back to the city. And so at the end of that 90-day period, this is a little bit of my arrogance, I guess. I walked into the middle of the quad, if you remember where we were then. It was before we were over on Mitchell. And Bob Cozen was also my basic trainer. And at that time, he was the head of the training department. And so the trainers were over playing pool in this room, and Bob walked out, and I walked over to him. I said, Bob, how come you haven't asked me to come be a trainer? And he said, I guess I was waiting for you to ask. A month later, I was down in corporate and going through as a trainer as a training. And in that interview, that group interview, I mentioned that because at one point I was in front of the room and I was being processed, that term, by guys like Dennis Becker and Jimmy Moore, and your dad popped his head in. And at some point they asked me which training I thought I could do. And my answer was, I can do them all, but I prefer to do the basic. And I prefer to do the basic because, as John just said a moment ago, everything's there. Everything is there in the basic. If we could just get it there. But sometimes we don't. So I was drawn to the basic. I ended up working a couple of times, about a half a dozen times in advanced courses, because we were growing then, and the numbers were getting big enough that sometimes we had to have 2 advanced courses off of the basic, and we didn't have a big enough trainer body to go around. So I was never a lead in advanced, but I worked some. But in basic, I always felt, again, this may have been my arrogance, I knew that I needed to work with every one of the trainers that were considered a lead trainer. And in those days, it was Mel Christie, Webb, Mike Burtwhistle, Cozen, Dwayne Smotherman. We didn't have any women at that time in the
Wasn't Randy still there when you?
Randy was just leaving when I came in.
Okay.
That's when he and John were ending their relationship. So Randy was there, but very briefly. So my feeling was
changing the relationship.
again, here's a bit of my arrogance, I guess. I knew that I would need to work with every one of the lead trainers at least once, so that they would be satisfied that I knew how to do this. So I worked with Webb. You know how it was. You know, it's mostly on-the-job training. You got to get in there and do pieces. And Webb would give me a piece, and you'd get feedback. And I know that from the moment I came in the training department until I was given the assignment to go to Phoenix to do a lead of a basic on my own, it was 90 days. And my understanding from other people that was a little bit unprecedented at the time. It usually was at least 6 months to a year before that would ever happen. And I don't mean to say that in a boastful way. That's just how it came out. After I'd worked with every one of them, I knew that criteria had been satisfied, and I just wasn't sure when someone would say, "Okay, we need you to go here, we need you to go there." And I was okay with all of that. I was okay with however long it would take, because it just felt like I was doing what I was here to do, as a person, as a soul, as a spirit. And there were so many experiences of the training and working with people outside the training that just were reinforcing that. So, but in terms of the mechanics of it, that's how it came down. So. John and Mike were, and Mel, they were all my idols. And I was like, okay, I get it. And the competitive part of me was like, okay, if I could do that part as halfway as good as Webb, I'm going to be good. If I could do that part as good as or better than Mike, then I'm going to be okay. And but it was pretty powerful. A lot of stuff. Webb always used to say that as a trainer, you need to be drawn to the canvas. The way he would word it is, the moment you're in the training room and the training's not working on you two, you need to get out. And I've never forgotten that, because that was really true. I can identify 3 trainings where that's where I was. I was flat. I wasn't connected to it. And the results certainly demonstrated that on the back end. All the other ones, when it was working me, as at the same time it was working everybody else, the results were as good or better than we wanted. And my mind just went blank, so I guess I got nothing more to say about that.
No, that's perfect. John, would you mind sharing that story about Randy Revelle was mentoring you, and when he had you share during the training?
Yeah, well, yeah, I'll put it in a little broader terms too. So I had a situation like that with your dad as well. Much different dynamic, but very similar. So I'd say the person that I was most mentored by, I don't, that's a hard word for me. That word doesn't represent it well enough, but the person who saw me as a trainer most was Randy Revelle. And his cornerstone. So Royce told you what I said to him, or what he heard me say. But what I heard Randy say was, to be effective, to do your best work, you've got to get yourself out of the way. Don't have any of John Webb up there as the trainer. You've got to allow the training to come through you, so you can't have your John Webb personality. To the degree that John Webb personality is in there, it's in the way of somebody else having an experience. And it becomes about you. So that was the challenge for me in getting permission to lead trainings, was, could I get myself out of the way? And so the one I would share with you is with your dad. I was a trainer in training in Washington, D.C. I was a junior trainer. So I was in training. Bob Cosm was the lead trainer, and Lifespring was growing so fast. So this was the largest training Washington, D.C. had ever had. I think it was 120 or 30 people, something like that. And so in a way, so the John Webb and me, I was just tagging along. But so Bob Cosm was going to do the training. Your dad was out there. They were reorganizing Lifespring as the business. The area directors were there. All the mucky mucks were there. And they were in the back of the room, and they were going to do all their business together while the training was going on. So Bob Cosm's leading the training, and the plan was that on Saturday at the meal break, they would turn the training over to me, because they figure from the meal break on, there's really nothing to do. You know, it's a close-eye process, the hug line, say goodnight, come back tomorrow, give them the homework, come back tomorrow. So, you know, how bad could I screw it up? So your dad's in the back of the room. I'm up there just doing a little piece of a segment of the training. And I thought I did a pretty good job. You know, I got them into the dyad so they could do the exercise. I walked to the back of the room, your dad's standing there. And he said, are you open to some feedback? I said, oh, sure. He's going to tell me how great I was, right? He said, well, my experience was that there's this tall, good-looking guy up there who's got two big 6-shooters. He pulls them out. He aims them. You hear the guns go off. There's smoke everywhere, but there are no bullets in the guns, and nobody's getting it. So then they turn the train over to me on the meal break. I start simple exercise, the hug line. All you have to say is, new moment of now, stop, step left, look at the person, you know, that's all you have to do. It's the easiest thing to do in the world. The captain of the team, so your dad and everybody had left the room. They're going to dinner, and then they're going to have their meeting, and I'm left with the training. So I'm standing there doing this thing. The captain of the team runs them down, finds them in the restaurant, and says, he's having a catastrophe. you better come back and save this training. It's bad. So that was the night I was sent to my hotel room. I had to call my fiance and tell her I had failed. And she said, I told you not to go to work for that company. I'd quit my job, which I loved, at the police department. It happened to be my birthday. I was a total, absolute failure. Had no job. My girlfriend was going to leave me. It was like the worst thing that could have ever happened. So, and I don't know what happened. I was going to leave Lifespring. They sent me to do a training with Russ Bishop in Eugene. He left me with the training, and it seemed to turn out. So then they let me go do trainings. But I never really felt like I made it as a trainer. I don't know what happened, but that's my story. I don't think I ever did the best training, which was getting myself out of the way. There was always some of my ego in there trying to do something. Fortunately, people got it in spite of me.
Yeah, I think they managed to find their way. Okay, well, listen, we could talk to you guys forever about your journey and the lessons you've learned along the way. Let's come to right now. We're coming together to support people and empower people and be with people essentially in a powerful way. in late October. So let's talk a little bit about what we have in store and what our intention is. So Royce, what would you say about that?
There's a tribe in Africa, I believe it's Kenya. I don't remember the name of the tribe, that has a rather interesting ritual of greeting each other. I was told this by a friend of mine who went on safari there, and they were out away from everybody and from civilization, and he was sitting there and he saw a guy walking in the distance this direction, another guy walking in the distance from this direction, and eventually they came together and they stood face to face, saying nothing for what seemed like an extended period of time. And then they parted ways and kept walking. And so he asked I guess he made a comment to his guide, what was that? And he said, oh, they're members of the name of the tribe, I don't recall, but they have a very strong belief that if you are not seen, you do not exist. And so that ritual of looking each other in the eyes is similar to being in a dyad with somebody, as we would know it. And they would stand there and look with each other till they connected. And then the exchange was, I see you. And the response is, I am here. And then they would go. That connection, if I want to distill down all of the amazingly powerful, emotional, uplifting, challenging things that happened in my life as a result of doing this work that got labeled in the human potential movement and now transformational work. And it's about solidifying that connection. First of all, making it happen, getting that connection and expanding on it, because it's, as John said so well, who I am today, or my awareness of who I am today, is so different than it was in those stories that I just told. So the world is in a different place than it's ever been, and everybody's in the place that they're in, and it's now again and continuously about expanding it, taking on the next challenge, or to borrow some words from Webb, taking this light that I may or may not be fully in touch with and getting it out there even more, so that the world can work for everybody. That was pretty much our motto from the beginning. It's still about that for me. Depending on what slice I want to take of the world right now, it would be really easy to conclude that it's not working very well. That would probably be a mistake. But when I look at it from a bigger place and from a sense of who I am, that's still evolving, and still the possibilities are still there, and I'm as energized about that as I've ever been. And if I can, and I know that if we come together, and when we come together, that's going to be a space for people to recharge if they need to be recharged, and find out more about who they are than they ever knew. And I fully want to celebrate having their minds blown about who they are, because I think we are that spectacular. And then my ego wants to grab that and do something with it. So I'll stop.
Great. John, what would you add?
Well, I think I just want to pick it up from what Royce has said, that my original view of the human potential possibility was that, you know, you work to fill yourself up. But what I've noticed is that as you begin to enhance, or Royce's words, expand, extend, that the potential grows too. It's like I notice in science, as science answers a question, it invites 100 more questions. It's like we're pursuing the answer, thinking there's an end point where we're going to have the answer for everything. But no, every time we answer a question, there are 10 new ones. There are more possibilities. And so Royce probably sees more opportunity in his life today than he ever did back then. He's probably fulfilled. He's gone far beyond. So when he thought about becoming a trainer, he went far beyond what he thought being a trainer was, way beyond that, and fulfilled it. But now there's more opportunity. And so if we look at that in terms of our society, our human race, we've made a lot of progress. I know we could look at the world and see all of these things that we would think are disruptive or destructive, but we're a lot more advanced than, in the last 2,000 years, we've advanced a lot. But the opportunity now, so it's clear to me what's possible, and that we can actually get it done. We can actually do it. And that's a big difference for me. Is a lot of what I saw as possibility, the training said, here are possibilities. I thought, well, yeah, I don't think, that sounds a little ethereal to me, like, walking on water. We're not going to really walk on water. I don't know why that example came up, because it probably wouldn't be a big accomplishment anyway. But the things that we can, I think we can actually do it. So if you think about being alive, so your book, John, Full Tilt Boogie, is it possible to actually be happy, alive, vital, every moment of our lives, be excited about life? Yeah, I think it is, regardless of what happens in the external world. And to know that that can impact the external world, and that the external world can be invited to that. So for anyone considering these 2 days, if you're interested in your own expansion, your own life, and enhancing it and fulfilling it, and your own well-being, your own joy, your own sense of being in your body, where else would you be than hanging around with these people whose whole lives are about that? And it's not that they're different than any of the rest of us, but their whole life has been about how to enhance this experience we call life, how to have it turn out the way we envision it, not the way the past predicts it. So if you're interested in having joy in your life, the well-being in your life, and having things turn out the way you envision them, the possibilities of the future, who else would you hang out with but these visionary people whose lives are about that? So it's an honor. It's an honor for me, John, that you invited me to participate, because it is a fulfillment. I see it as a 2-day fulfillment of my vision. That this could even happen in my lifetime, that I could hang out with people like your dad, Randy Ravel, you, Royce. How could the John Webb, how could the John Webb of 1977 get invited to hang out with these people? It's unfathomable. The cop in Portland, Oregon, who couldn't even write a traffic ticket. So
it worked out pretty well.
Man, thank God.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think you guys said it very, very well. And so anybody who's watching this, we humbly and excitedly invite you to join us in late October. Invite all your friends and family to come join us. It's going to be the place to be. And we're going to shower you with love and affection and joy. And you're going to experience that within yourself. So
Come play with
uh,
us. Come play with us.
yeah, come play. We're going to have an awesome time. And guys, thank you so much for this time, and look forward to seeing you soon.
All right, John.
Au revoir.
Au revoir. Take care.